Go.
Hello and welcome to Writer Mother Monster. I'm your host, Laura Ehrlich, and our guest tonight is Meagan McGovern. Before I introduce Meagan, thank you all for tuning in, and you can now listen to Writer Mother Monster as a podcast on all audio platforms or read the interview transcripts on writermothermonster.com. If you enjoy the episode, please consider becoming a patron or patroness on Patreon. I'm a one-woman band at the moment, so your support helps make this series possible. Please also chat with us during the interview. Your comments and questions will appear in our broadcast studio and we'll weave them into the conversation. Now I'm excited to introduce Meagan. Meagan McGovern writes fierce, funny, and true stories about the American food system, homeschooling, social justice, and the odd quirks of American life. She lives on a farm teetering on the far edge of the country in Washington state, raising beef, chickens, and children. She recently went viral in braids and a Target dress, but her children, ages 10, 16, and 20, don't think it's nearly as funny as she does. If you haven't seen it, check it out on Facebook. We'll include the link on the podcast. She has also just finished a memoir about growing up on the run with a mother who was a con artist. So we will talk to her about all of these things and more in just a second. But first, welcome, Meagan.
Hi, I'm glad to be here.
Hi, Meagan. Of course. Thank you for joining us. So first, let's just kick off with something I'm sure everyone wants to hear about, the infamous viral Target Prairie dress. So can you tell us just where this initiated and where it took you?
Sure. I mean, it was such a funny thing that in the middle of this pandemic, in the middle of, where we're all stuck here, that Target thinks that what everybody wants is a prairie dress. And I know that everybody in the 70s, there was a throwback to prairie dresses and Holly Hobby and Little House on the Prairie. But you would think that now that everybody was on Zoom and everybody was doing, high-tech things to connect with each other, that the last thing people want to be reminded of is being their grandmothers and being stuck out in the middle of nowhere. And so I thought I would, when I saw it, I was like, well, I live on a farm in the middle of nowhere. Let's go ahead and play that up. And once I did, and I started with the pictures, I realized that this is everybody's worst nightmare, is being stuck back. I mean, every single job that was lost in the pandemic was a woman, and every single mother had to deal with childcare. No, very few fathers had to quit jobs or anything else. And I mean, all of a sudden people are cooking again. They're making bread again. We're dealing with a plague. And it feels very much like you're in the 1890s, stuck in the middle of nowhere, baking bread, watching children, and not allowed to go out and work and not allowed to go out into society. I mean, so it was kind of a throwaway thing that I thought maybe 100 people would see. I didn't imagine that it would have 55,000 shares and that people would start following me. And all of a sudden I started getting friend requests. So I was like, oh, people want to friend me. And the next day I had 700 friend requests. So I was like, oh. And then it was 22,000 people following me. And I was like, I'm not really that funny. I don't know if I'm going to be this funny every day, but I'll see what I can throw out there. I can always put in pictures of baby goats. Those are always popular. So,
yeah. I have to say I love goats. I had goats growing up, although we were not farmers.
Yeah.
No, but you mentioned being funny and the humor, and that's something I cannot understate, is how funny that post is on Facebook. And for all of you who aren't familiar with it, and you go, make sure to read each of the captions under the amazing images, because it really is. It's sort of a satire of living in the 1800s on a farm during the end of the world, which I think captured everyone's feelings very precisely.
What kind of life is it that, if you had said to somebody 3 years ago, or 2 or 3, well, I say 5 years ago, somebody said, you're going to be at the point where Donald Trump is president, you're fighting over toilet paper in the middle of a plague, in the middle of an economic collapse, and there are going to be people storming the Capitol. You've been like, nope. Yeah, that's not, I've had enough of the dystopian science fiction novels for one day.
Yeah, definitely. and it's brought some well-needed levity to the horrors that we were living
Yeah,
and are
yeah,
still living through, although Trump is
yeah,
gone. Yeah.
yeah,
And we were talking before the interview just about being a public figure now and what that's like for you because you are, for better or worse, now sort of very
yeah.
visible on social media, right?
And it's interesting. I mean, I've always been a writer, and I used to write for the Houston Chronicle, and I used to be a newspaper reporter for years. And 5 million people would read an article of mine on a Sunday, but it was other people's words. I was writing about, the president, or about what the mayor was doing, or the Violence Against Women Act, something like that, where I could go in and tell other people's stories, but I didn't have to expose my own feelings or anything else. So I had a curtain behind me and my words. But these are, if I screw up, everybody hears it. If I say the wrong thing, everybody comes back to me and says, no, actually, these were your words. And a few years ago, I hurt a friend of mine's feelings pretty badly. And I said, oh, well, I didn't mean that. And she said, you're a writer. You know what your words mean. You know everything that you say has double the meaning, because when you say something, you have every idea of what that impact is. And I was like, well, that's not fair. Oh, maybe it is. Maybe I do actually have to be careful about what I say.
Yeah, and there was an interesting thread on your page the other day that I found myself just following as a spectator. But you were writing about your experience with it's your son, right,
Right.
who has autism.
I have three children, and they're all, I don't really like to label them, but they are all quirky, and they all have challenges, I say, instead of issues. But I mean, they're odd. They're odd birds, all of them. But they're my odd birds. They're my little flock, and we do what we do to get through. And yes, we struggle with ADD. I mean, I am all over the place. The first person, if you read 3 of my posts, you will know that I am all over the place. I am out in the garden while I am also, cooking, while I'm also supposed to be writing a book, while I'm doing an interview, while I'm also homeschooling. And if somebody asks me what I do for a living, I have no idea, and I still don't. I mean, I'm a gluten-free baker, but I'm also a writer, but I'm also a mother, and so we all have ADD. We are all scattered, and we just kind of pull it together. And so I wrote a post about, my quirky family that I embrace. And somebody wrote back and just pushed back on it and said that it was not the appropriate way to discuss this, and that I was coming at it from the wrong perspective. And the conversation around autism and about ADD has evolved over the last 15 years incredibly. The same way that the conversation about race and conversation about politics, the conversation about who we are as Americans has evolved. And somebody who hasn't been following that, somebody who is new to the discussion about autism, what it is, or somebody who's new to discussing race, if they jump into a conversation on a Black Lives Matter activist about race, they're going to have a whole different vocabulary, understanding, background, and semantics. If somebody who is transgender and has been through and is 40 years old and went through this 20 years ago and is steeped in activism has a page, and somebody else jumps in and says, let me tell you what I think about trans people, there's such a disconnect now with layers and layers and layers of meaning and nuance, that every conversation you get into, especially online, you have to know where the other people are coming from, what their language means, what different words mean in different contexts. It becomes harder conversations to navigate than it used to be.
Yeah, yeah. And especially on your personal page, right? When people are
Right,
coming to your page and,
right,
as we were saying, sort of coming there to argue or
right,
to bring their agendas to your
right.
page where you have a following. How do you navigate that?
Well, I have a very clear policy on my page, and I state it, I mean, every once in a while. And one of my favorite expressions is, the devil doesn't need an advocate. He's got plenty. I'm good. And the other one is that on my page, you will treat it like my living room. And these are my friends. These are people I have invited into my living room. And they're people that I like and respect. And you will not come in and say unkind things to each other. You can say you disagree. You can have an interesting conversation. You can jump in and talk about whatever you want to talk about. The minute somebody's disrespectful or unkind, I'm going to ask them to leave, the same way I would ask them to leave my living room if they were disrespectful and unkind. And once people realize that this is not, the it's not a public forum like the Fox News comments or the New York Times comments. This is the page of a real person. You're not standing in the middle of a public park arguing with each other. You're standing in somebody's house who has invited you in, and you can go away and go argue somewhere else if you don't like it. And people tend to respect that. And my overall directive is to be kind. You don't have to be nice, because nice is kind of fake and has an overlay of cynicism, but kind is important, and we work on that.
Yeah, definitely. Tell me more about your writing career. So you mentioned some of the journalism that you've done. Take us just from the very beginning, the discovery of the power of words, to where you are now.
Right. Well, my mother was an interesting character, and she always was, but she was a reporter in New York City in the 1950s and 60s. And she got to interview the Beatles on their first concert when they came to wherever it was, Madison Square Garden or something. And she was 5'10" and blonde and very pretty, and one of the first female reporters that were out there. And so she got a lot of attention, when she was out there. And she told us these stories growing up. That was all we heard. Was she was a fashion reporter and a celebrity reporter, and she had quite a way with words. And so I had always been open to the idea that writing is a good way to make a living, and it's which it isn't, but it's an interesting way to tell stories, and it's an interesting way to connect with people. And so when I went to college, I was going to go for creative writing, and I was going to write novels. And the people who were helping with my education said, yeah, you can't make a writing living with novels. You've got to have a career that the day you get out of college, you can go and get a job. You can't just live on a sofa for the next 5 years. So, all right, I'll try journalism. And it was fun. I worked in Houston at the Houston Chronicle. I worked out in College Station, Texas, which is home of A&M University, and I was a very liberal, young, naive person who had no idea what A&M was or what College Station, Texas was, and that was eye-opening. I was a police reporter in Conroe, Texas, where I worked with the sheriff's department, and got to see, I don't know if I got to, I saw my first deaths. I got to work with the police on arrests, and there was a flood that came through and killed a lot of people. And I went to the scenes and saw the bodies, and that was a lot. And then I switched to editing for a while, and that was a lot of fun too, because that made me a better writer. Because when you see how badly these people turn in their stories, you're like, oh, I can't believe I ever did that. And editing was fun. And then I did feature writing. And then I had kids, and my kids were challenging. And so I stopped working for money and started working for my kids instead. And all the time I've been writing in the background. I've been writing a book about growing up with my mother. And I've never published it. I've never moved forward with it. I've been talking about it for years, but not done anything with it. And I think the time has finally come that it's the right time to publish. And so that's what I've been working on. And, Facebook posts, because that's been my outlet, is the computer. And I used to have a group of women that we wrote with every day. We would write 100 emails in the course of a couple of days. And now that Facebook came around, that's turned into another outlet that's an easy, fun, it's almost like a newspaper. You have a deadline. You can only write one thing, and then it goes away, just like a newspaper. It's not like a book where you can go back and, where you have to edit and edit it and edit it. Once the Facebook post is gone, people have seen it. You need to move on to the next thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there's so much I want to break down here that I'm excited about talking with you about where to start. So tell me, let's talk about the memoir first, and about your mother. And you said in your bio it's about your mother, the con artist. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
That's a 2-word way to describe her, and I don't know if that's fair to her. She was a character. She was a writer. She was one of the most brilliant women anybody has ever met. She was sharp, but she had a troubled childhood, and she ended up she had a fantastic life in New York City as a journalist. And then she met my father, and my father was an actor in New York City in, I think she met him in 1968 or 1969. And he was he was a drunk. He was a character, he wanted to be Jack Nicholson or Paul Newman, and he ran with Jack Nicholson and Paul Newman and wanted to be one of them. And he was always on kind of the outskirts of it, but never managed to break free into the whole, next tier of acting. But he did a lot of theater work. And they met each other, and they both brought out the absolute worst in each other, and absolute chaos ensued. And he left his wife and small child for her, and she left New York City, and they had run-ins with the mafia, they had run-ins with debt, they had run-ins with police officers, and they ended up getting run out of New York City. And after they left, they went to Los Angeles, where they started over again. And they had 4 children in 5 years, and I was the oldest. And they were okay. But when my dad finally had enough of it, when I was 10 years old, and my mom took the 4 of us and didn't know what to do with herself. She had 4 little girls under 10 years old. And we kind of just went on a spree all over the country. She didn't know where to go. We had $600 a month to live on in child support. And we went to upstate New York, and then we went and we were there for about a year. And she had no money, so she got renter's insurance on the place we were living in, and she burned down the house. And I know, with everything we owned, and took that money, and we went to Texas, and then we lived in, I don't know, 8 or 10 houses in Texas. Then we went back to Los Angeles, and then we went up to Oregon, and then we went back down to Los Angeles, and then we went to Connecticut. And at which point I was 17 or 18, and I said, okay, I've had enough. I'm staying here. And my mother went off on her way, and she went to South Carolina, and then she went to the Bahamas, and then she went to Europe, and she just kept going and going and going. And there was never any income. It was always insurance checks and kiting checks. And, if she would get $1,000 from relatives, she would start a new bank account. And that $1,000, you can write a lot of bounce checks on $1,000. You can live for 3, 4, 5 months before they are going to arrest you. And so then you go to the next town, and then you need $1,000 to set up, and you can do it for another 4 or 5,000, 4 or 5 months. And I went to 27 schools in 6 or 7 states, I think. I can't remember. And I was the only one watching my sisters. I was 10, 11, 12, and they were, when we started this whole thing, we were, 4, 6, 8, and 10. And I watched them all and took care of them, and cooked and cleaned and did all of that, and swore I would never have children, and I was never going to take care of little kids. And it was interesting. I mean, she was fantastic in a lot of ways. She was funny, and she was smart, and she was clever, and she also was hard to live with. And you never knew which way was up, and you didn't know when you got home if the electricity was going to be on, and if you were going to have the play date with your friend, or if there was going to be a moving van in the driveway. And so it was hard to keep up with people. And I ended up living in a world of books and literature, which also probably helped my writing a lot. And, my sisters, I think, had it even harder than I did, because they were younger. Well, and they had me to raise them, which wasn't much. And, but we got through it. There was a lot of laughter. One of the things that my sister keeps saying is, your book's not funny enough. It was funny. And I was like, it was funny, but it's also hard to write about how funny it was. And one of the key things in my book that I end up telling the story over time is that when I was 10, I found out about my father's son from his first marriage, and that I had an older brother. And I was like, that's impossible. I'm the oldest. That's it. There is no way I have an older brother. And eventually I got to meet him. And then when I was 20 or 21, I found out that my mother finally started to tell me some of her stories. And I found out that she had 3 children she had given up for adoption before she had us. And so she had this whole life. She hadn't met my dad until she was 30. And she had a baby at 15, and a baby at 21 or 22, and then another baby at 23 or 24. And she was very Catholic, and didn't have the resources to have babies, and the nuns took them. And then a couple of years ago, 2 of the brothers showed up. 2 of the babies showed up, and they're my older brothers. And we've ended up connecting through 23andMe. And I met one of them last summer, and I've been talking to the other one via Facebook. And so it's been, an interesting journey, because they call up and they say, well, so tell me about my mom. I'm like, oh boy, wow, that's something. I'm not sure where do you want me to start? And I've always been pretty annoyed that I'm 5'5" when my mother was 5'10", and one of the brothers is 6'7". I'm like, damn, that's so unfair, And I would have loved to have had older brothers when I was growing up. I mean, I don't think they deserved the childhood I had. I don't think anybody deserved the childhood I had, but it would have been interesting to have them and to see what would have happened if they had been around, if there had been more openness, if there had been a way to connect everybody back then.
Yeah, that sounds incredibly challenging. I
It
can't imagine.
was. It
Yeah.
was. But, I mean, but it wasn't. It was a bad childhood. And some things I was very angry with my mother for. But on the other hand, there was, and this is all children really need, the stability of knowing that somebody really did care about us and
Mhm.
love us. And my mother's sisters were always around, and they were not able to step in and fix it, but we knew we had a place to go if things got really bad. We were never going to be homeless.
Yeah.
Even though we were homeless, we weren't ever going to be really homeless. There's still a safety net under the safety net kind of thing.
That makes sense. Yeah. And you said that because of that, you you did not want children, and I
No,
can understand. I
never.
mean, that's you had a lot of
Right,
responsibility when
right.
you were growing up. At what point did you decide you did want children?
Um, I was going to, when I was 27, 28, I was going to take my career as a, copy editor, and I was going to run away and I was going to go teach English in Prague or do something in Europe. I always wanted to have an adventure. I wanted to do my own life, get away from my family, not be stuck as um, being identified as the oldest of four or the oldest McGovern girl or, any of that. And I wanted to go find myself. And I met my husband, sadly and wonderfully. I met my husband, and that was the end of that idea because he had a job. And in order to make money, he had to actually go to work every day. And I had never been around somebody who had to work 9 to 5, Monday through Friday, every single day to make money. And I was like, what is that? We can't just run away. And he had money in a savings account. I was like, if you have money in a savings account, why aren't we spending it and going to Europe? And he's like, that's not the way it works. And he owned a house. And I was like, if you own a house, why aren't we selling it and running away and having adventures? He's like, boy, I gotta, yeah. And he kind of took a couple steps back at that one. Like, okay. But when we got engaged, we flew to Paris together. And he had the money to go because he hadn't blown all of his money on wild things. He had the money to take me to Paris, and we went to Paris. And it was eye-opening and amazing to see the kind of things that you could do if you actually had a job and worked and saved money. And I mean, we joke about it. It's kind of a silly cliche, but I build all the castles in the air and he puts foundations over. He runs around under my castles trying to build foundations as fast as I can create the castles. And it has worked. It has been a very good partnership. And when I met him, I said, oh, turns out I didn't want any children. I want your children. You, I can see you and having your kids. That works. Okay. And it's been really good.
Yeah, it sounds like he helped build a foundation not just under castles but under your life a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, and he would never have thought about going to Paris. That just wouldn't occur to him. It wasn't where he had, it was just adventure. I'm an engineer. Engineers don't do adventure. And but we really complement each other well. And it's been almost 25 years and we haven't looked back.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
So tell us more about your kids. And so you have 3 kids, right?
I have 3 kids, and we have a bonus that's living with us now. My nephew came to live with us a while ago, and he's fantastic. He's he's out on a boat right now. He's a boat captain, and he's 30. And then we have my oldest is 20, and he is in college in Minnesota, and he's a Dungeons and Dragons enthusiast and a medieval history guy, and he's very, very into the stuff that he's into. And we debate back and forth whether he's geeky or a nerd, but he'll call me up and say, did you know about the history of capitalism in the 1920s and how it affected gender equality? No, I didn't. And he gets very into that kind of stuff. And he's a good egg. And my middle, Sander, he's pretty fantastic. He's 16. And he's the one who we talk about. He had autism when he was little. And I say he had autism because I know you don't grow out of it. But when he was 2 or 3, he did not speak. And we didn't think he would be functioning as an adult, as been able to speak as an adult. And he was tough. He had a really rough start to things. And the year for his first 18 months, he didn't stop screaming. And it was very, very rough. And now at 16, he still likes what he likes. I mean, we talked a lot. He loved the platypus, and he was like the world's leading expert on the platypus for 7-year-olds for a long time. And we went to every museum and every Australian animal we could find. We went to the kangaroo places, and we did a marine mammal study because he was into orchids for a while. And then when it's kind of funny, the year that Barack Obama got elected, he was, I think he was 4. And I gave him an electoral college map because we're homeschoolers, and that's what we do as homeschoolers. We're those geeky people. And he started coloring red and blue into the states. That was it. He's been hooked ever since, and he's been into politics. And he can name every senator and most representatives and tell you whether they're the junior senator or senior senator from their state, how many percentage points they got, elected by, what their biggest problems are in the state, why they're going to get reelected or not. And he's right now focused on the Rio Grande Valley or Rio Grande. I'm not sure which one you actually say in Texas. And the valley there, and why they switched from blue to red in the last election, and what they're going to do and how many percentage points they need to swing back. And he's got a whole Twitter account about it. And okay, dude, that's your thing. And he loves to take out his game board of the Electoral College. And if somebody will say, I just don't understand how the Electoral College works and why if you win the popular vote, you might not win I got this. And he goes in. But he's actually turned out to be the most socially adept of any of us, which I never saw coming. He likes to study other teenagers and people around him and say, okay, that's how they dress. That's what they do. That's how they talk. And then he just goes and blends right in and wears those clothes, which I've never been able to do. I can't figure out how to dress or what to wear or what people say. And he's good at it. And he gets kind of annoyed that we don't. He's like, you could just fit in, I'm like, I could try, but I can't. He's like, it's easy. You just do it. You just fit in. And so for 16, he's doing pretty good. He was on the rowing team last year, and it's been hard for everybody. He went from rowing 3 hours a day to no exercise at all. And we got this farm because he needed goats. He needed animals. And so he has, right now we have 2 or 3 cows and 5 goats, and he has chickens, and he has a dog that he adores that sleeps on his head, and he has barn cats and everything else. And he has everything he needs to thrive. And then I have my little one, her name is Scout. She is 10, and she was born when I was 41. And the other day she said, so tell me what life was like pre-Scout. I said, well, I kind of waited for you forever. I said, I was going to have a girl first. And you were planned. You were my little girl. I said, you didn't come around till 10 years later. I said, everybody was already born and you had 2 older brothers. I said, I waited and waited and you finally showed up. She said, well, I wish you had me when you were 30 instead of 40. I said, why? She said, well, because then you'd take me to the park and take me places and you'd have energy to do stuff besides house projects. I was like, look, kid, that's not fair. She's like, it's been COVID. That's the whole reason we're not going anywhere. She's like, we could go to a picnic if you wanted. It's like, fine. Use the guilt, twist all the screws. And of course, we ended up at the park having a picnic that night. So yeah, she's the one who really gets how things work and what to say and what to do. And she's something. I write a lot about Scout stories. And going back to being a public figure, though, that's my favorite thing to do, to write about my kids and to talk about their personalities and their quirks. I'm okay talking about it here in a public broadcast. Do I want pictures of my kids in front of 20,000 people? Do I want their names, middle names and where they live and what school they go to, and a picture of my pubescent 10-year-old girl on Facebook? It was great when it was my friends and my family and people that I knew in real life. 20,000 people, not so much. But
how are you navigating that? What are you doing anything differently?
Yeah, I'm doing a lot differently. I'm saying things like my son or my middle son or my oldest son instead of Sawyer, and assuming that everybody knows who Sawyer is. I'm not posting pictures of my kids as nearly as much. I might put 1 or 2 pictures if they are innocuous, generic photos. I'm not posting videos of Scout singing her fantastic songs or her artwork or any of the things that sort of bring my page to life and that people love, and that people love to hear funny stories about Scout because she's fantastic. But they're her stories. And I think that every person has a right to their own stories and their own privacy. And of course, she doesn't mind me sharing them with my sisters and my aunt and the people who were on Facebook a while ago. Does she want me sharing them with people who are in Australia or Prague and, who don't know her? I don't know. And if she does now at 10, when she's 22 and looks up her name, will she want them to know that, somebody stole those pictures and had them on the website for a while? So, there's a lot to navigate. There's a lot to figure out what to say and what not to say. And I have felt not silenced by Facebook and having these many followers, but certainly the depth, it becomes shallower. I don't jump in and say, oh my fucking God, did you hear about this thing in politics? Because I can't, because not everybody's going to agree with me. It used to be that everybody agreed with me because that's why they were friends with me on Facebook. Now, not everybody agrees with me. Not everybody wants to hear bad language. And I'm like, this is me. You're going to hear bad language, but they don't know that. They don't know who my kids are, and they don't know my politics. And it's hard to get into the depths of that. And I find myself talking about things like gardening and cooking more, which are pretty innocuous topics, but they're safe and they're connectable. And everybody says, oh my God, you're so relatable. I'm like, gardening's relatable, not me. I mean, I am, but I'm not. I mean, gardening's relatable, and whether or not I wear makeup is relatable, and, but maybe my politics, not so much.
Yeah. Yeah. You're a human being with unrelatable and relatable qualities.
Right. It's hard to know. It is. It's hard to make sure that I'm not at all stifling myself, but I also don't want to piss people off. Last thing I want, and I really enjoy that I have people that like me and that I am connecting with. And there are a lot of people that I really, really am having fun with on Facebook. At the same time, if you got 20,000 people turning on you, I've seen that happen. It's not something I want to happen because I just wasn't careful with my words.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. We see those cancellation culture. Yeah.
Right.
Let's go back to, so something I also wanted to ask you about. I want to get to the farm too, because there's a lot there, but tell me about homeschooling.
Homeschooling is fantastic. And it gets, now it doesn't get a bad, well, and it is now too. Homeschooling is not at home and it's not schooling. It is the best way that I know how to describe it. And I've written an article about this on Medium, but I've talked about it for years, is that you are the contractor. You are not the builder. Every child, if you consider that an education is a home to shelter your child sort of thing, that you consider that this is, in the analogy, you're building a house. Every child needs something different. And, my middle child needs probably a cabin in the woods with lots of animals around him. And my older child needs Hogwarts and Oxford College and a place that has ancient, deep books in medieval language. And, Scout may need a place in a cool flat in New York City that, where she could study gender equity and all of that. And I would never build my son a log cabin. And I don't think the people that are building Oxford are the same people who should be building log cabins. You need different people to do those things. What my job is just to go find the people who can build those things and who are good at that, and then connect them with my son. And so if my son wants to learn about politics, I can't teach him about politics and I can't teach him about statistics, but I can get him into great classes with things that do that. And I can teach him how to go find what he needs to learn. My older son, he took fantastic classes he took a class in literature through Lord of the Rings, and he took classes in science fiction and dystopia, and he took classes in dystopian movies, science fiction and dystopian movies. And I think he's taken 5 different classes in science fiction. I've never read any of those books, but he's dived deep into them, and he's able to work with great teachers and great writers. And I think people who think they can't homeschool think that homeschooling is sitting in front of your kids trying to teach them. And I don't teach my kids anything. I get out of the way and let them learn what they want to learn. And even now, when I moved into this house 8 years ago, we had 3,000 books, and they were mostly homeschooling books. And I had a bin of books about Rome and ancient Greeks, and a bin of books about medieval knights, and another box of bins about Vikings, and one about Shakespeare. And now I'm finding that with Scout, we don't use the books. And I'm kind of heartbroken over that, since I'm a writer and a book person and a book nerd. But it's just as much fun to go and watch the Romans reenactment and watch the troops and watch the generals and see all of it on YouTube as it is to read a book about it that's static and everything else. And of course, I want my kids to be able to dive deep into great literature, but you can do almost anything on YouTube. And I tried to teach myself to knit years ago, over and over again from a knitting book. Couldn't do it. YouTube, I got it. I got it in a couple of hours, and you could rewind and go, oh, that's what you're supposed to do. And so homeschooling with YouTube, I mean, I don't understand how anybody is sitting in a regular classroom. I don't learn through videos and watching lectures. I would much rather have it on a piece of paper in front of me where I can skim through it, get it next, and not wait for somebody to finish all of their words. And so if I have the option of sitting through a lecture in a college course, or sitting through a lecture from anybody, or being able to watch YouTube, skim through all the PowerPoints, get through all the things, and then move on to the next one, or just get the points that I want to get out of it and move on. I mean, why would I sit through hours and hours and hours of lecture? I think that school's old-fashioned, school is outdated. The idea that any child can't choose what they want to learn is horrific to me. Why would anybody have to learn certain things in third grade and certain things in fourth grade and certain things in fifth grade? Why not, if your kid's really into ancient Greek, let them spend 3 years learning all about ancient Greece, and then later on let them learn about the other stuff. And so we've spent 20 years doing learning by experience, I guess, is the way to do it. We go to museums, and we've done field trips, and we did a fantastic trip I wrote about, the Little House on the Prairie road trip, where we went from here to South Dakota and explored everything from Yellowstone to Laura Ingalls' house, and we got to sleep in a covered wagon on her property, and that was our American History World Tour. And so, I mean, homeschooling doesn't look the same for anybody, or if it does, then you're doing it wrong. And it shouldn't look like school. It shouldn't feel like school. School is a way that you teach 30 kids at once, and you do crowd control. And, homeschooling is individualizing, customizing an education for each child. And, we farm school more than anything.
And you've set up a network, right? It's not just,
yeah, I have when we moved here, there was the network here was for Christian homeschoolers. And that's the way that most homeschooling started out in the 70s, was for Christian homeschoolers who didn't like the government having a say in their education. And so they, to their credit, did a very good job in every state, making sure that homeschooling was legal and that homeschooling was controlled by the parents. And because of those laws, everybody now has a fantastic network of homeschoolers in every state, but a lot of them are conservative Christians. And so the whole core of the point of the Christian curriculum is to teach that evolution is wrong. And so a lot of the science is terrible, and a lot of the books are from a perspective I'm not interested in. And they have started from a perspective of having books to give to missionaries in other countries. And so they had curriculum that they could send to missionaries in Africa, that they could teach their students. And they were very, very traditional public schools. It doesn't fit anything what we were doing. And so when we got here, there was a Christian homeschooling set network here, and we went to 3 meetings and said, okay, next. And we set up our own. And so now we have, I think, 1,400 families in the network, and it's mostly just a Facebook group, but we have a not back to school picnic in September, and we have some classes, and every Wednesday when there's not COVID, we have a fantastic park day that will have anywhere from 50 to 200 kids running around on the beach or in the park, and talking, and all the moms get together, some dads get together and talk about whether they've got a kid who needs a biology class that year and how to get a biology class going, or whether they need what the best writing program is, and what they're going through. And so it's been a good source for me to be able to, I was terrible at spacing children. Right? That's why I have a 10-year-old, a 30-year-old, and a 20-year-old. And not many people have been homeschooling 20 years. And so when they come and they say, I'm having an issue with this, I've probably seen it before. I've probably got a good curriculum to go to, and I'm a good resource to have. So it's good to be able to do that.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
That is amazing. Yeah. And I'm sure that a lot of women out there listening right now who have been homeschooling their kids in, the pandemic version of homeschooling.
They don't get to see homeschooling. They see the worst of it. And people keep writing in, they're like, well, I've been homeschooling and it sucks. I'm like, yeah, it does. They're like, but you love homeschooling. I'm like, Not now, I don't. I like homeschooling when we have park day. And I mean, in this group that we're in, we have, we have homeschool skiing, we have homeschool ice skating, we have homeschool roller skating, we have park day, we have archery club, we have chess club, we have math club. I ran 3 different book clubs. We have a homeschool 4-H group with goats. We have everything. And then not the best part about homeschooling that none of the people who are pandemic homeschooling will ever see is that we have all of the museums and all the parks to ourselves. We have every day, and the museums are empty. Every day, the movie theaters are empty. We get to go do all of that. Not anymore. We're stuck at home. And the other huge benefit to homeschooling is that you get to pick your curriculum. If your kid wants to be a chef, and everybody comes and says, what's the best curriculum? I'm like, okay, does your kid want to be a ballerina or a chef or an architect or a lawyer? I don't know what the best curriculum is. What if your kid wants to be a mechanic? I can't tell them to go take this curriculum if they want to work on cars. Like, that's what homeschooling is. You go learn about what you're interested in. That's what you're doing. And yes, of course, you need reading and writing and math and everything else. And you don't want to shut doors. The most key point to all of this is that you don't want to handicap your kid by not teaching them things that they need to go do one path or another if they change paths. But there's nothing wrong with going down 100 different paths to find out what you want to do and following passions. And the homeschooling pandemic version, where you have to sit in front of a computer and click all day long and sit in front of Zoom meetings all day long, it makes me want to throw up thinking about it. And so many people are miserable. I'm like, of course you're miserable. This is not homeschooling. This is, I don't know what this is.
Something very different. Yeah.
And then I get the pushback from, well, the teachers are doing the best they can. Of course the teachers are doing the best they can, but it still sucks. And of course this is a miserable way to do it. And there are thousands of children, hundreds of thousands of children, who the only time they eat is at school. The only human connection they get is from teachers. That teachers are the only people who are safe. I would never take that away from people who need public school and from children who get a great deal out of public school. But at the same time, I don't think anybody is served by Zoom meetings all day long.
No, definitely not. Yeah, I want to follow that thread because I'm on Zoom meetings all day long for a different reason. I'm like, oh God. But so you do so many things, and you have been doing so many things for 20 plus years, even before you had kids, but now you have children and you have a nephew and you have this homeschooling network and you have a farm with all these animals and you've written a memoir, and you have a public persona through which you're writing. How do you also fit your writing in? Let's talk logistics. Like, when do you write?
That's funny because what I was thinking when somebody said, what are you going to talk about? I said, well, I'm going to talk about, I would love to see an article about, Tolkien and Lewis. They always talked about how Tolkien and C.S. Lewis were good friends and they were talking about their writing at Oxford and everything. And nobody ever said to them, well, when do you feed your kids? And when do you do the cooking and grocery shopping? And how do you do your laundry? And, and who gives the kids baths? And I would love to see an article about, their children. We know the answer to that. I mean, we absolutely know what the answer to where Tolkien's kids were. He had 4 kids under 10 when he was writing, Lord of the Rings, and he didn't give them baths. He didn't do laundry. He didn't clean up. He had a maid and a housekeeper and a wife. Maybe the wife was the maid and the housekeeper. I don't know. But the answer to that, and a lot of people aren't going to like this, but it is what it is I don't do a lot of things. I don't clean. I don't do a lot of dishes. I don't do a lot of laundry. My house is a mess. I don't care. And I don't have housekeeping standards for somebody else. My husband does the laundry because he doesn't mind doing it. And he's good at it. And I suck at it. My kids do the dishes. I do the grocery shopping and the cooking because I like it. And I'm good at it. And I'm fast at it. And some nights we don't. Some nights we have scrounge night. We have leftovers and everything else. And I mean, one of the key things I did learn from my mother growing up is that your life doesn't have to look like other people's lives. You don't have to fit what other people want you to fit in. And there are days when I go around my living room and think, oh my God, I need to figure out how to put a rug in that matches this, and I need to get end tables. People need end tables. They need lamps. Why can't my living room look like everybody else's living room? And why did I took up the rug because we have a pandemic puppy, so my living room looks empty and it looks ridiculous. And there are other days that I have piles of things. Everybody has piles of things, but ADD people have real piles of things. And I think I've got to put all this away and I've got to do this. And I think, no, I don't. I want to write. I don't want the piles to take over my life. And there are people who would argue that if you were organized and on top of things, you wouldn't have piles and they wouldn't take over your life and you would have time to write. Okay, maybe that works for you. For me, I got to have my piles of things and my stuff. And I don't feel guilt about not having a perfect house. I don't feel guilt about not having perfect clothes for my kids. I don't have any, we don't do dry cleaning. We don't do nice clothes. We don't go to church. We don't have a lot of social activities beyond homeschooling. And yes, we have to take care of cows, and we have obligations. We have to take care of cows. They yell at you if you don't. The goats yell at you if you don't, or if you aren't out there taking care of them. The kids yell at you if you don't feed them, even though I keep forgetting. But the things that are not important, we let go. And I think one of the most key things you can learn is that the only things you have that matter are your time and your attention. That's it. And where you put your time and your attention defines who you are. And if I put my time and attention to having a perfect house, or to making sure that it looks like other people's houses, or to make sure that other people approve of me, then that's where my life will be spent. And I don't have any interest in that. I just don't. And if that means that some people disapprove, I'm okay. My next door neighbor doesn't approve of me. She hates me. My yard is a mess, and she has a beautiful, clean yard. She doesn't like that we have dandelions. I'm like, I have 10 acres and I have cows. I'm going to have dandelions, and she wants me to use Roundup on my yard and mow no, not today. It's just not going to happen. And things like that are just not things I've just learned to slide off my back. And so because of that, I don't have a lot of time for writing, but I do make it a priority. That's what I do. Is I write, and I even if it's just a post on Facebook, I now have a draft folder of things I want to write about, things that are important to me. And even if it's only 30 to 40 minutes of sitting down and fleshing out an idea or working on one chapter, I think it's worth putting my time and attention into something that has value, because otherwise I'm useless. I'm not good to other people. I'm not a good mother. I'm not a good wife. I'm not a good friend if I'm stuck. I am never more miserable and unhappy and grumpy and nasty as somebody who is taking care of others and has no life for myself. You don't want me around. Nobody. I'm just a miserable human being, and I turn bitter. And I would much rather be a happy, easygoing mother with dishes in the sink and not do them. And I know there are people who cannot go to sleep if there are dishes in the sink and there's laundry to be done. I don't care. I'd rather write.
I love that. That's very freeing. And Kristen Varley had a great comment here that I'll just put up for us. Yeah, I'd like to echo that your life doesn't need to look like other people's lives. And Kristen says, I wish I'd been told that even once before I was 25. I figured it out at 43. Me too.
Yeah.
I'm 39.
It is very freeing. It is very freeing to just, well, it's not even knowing that it's living it. It's very hard to live that life. And I didn't know I had ADD. I didn't know what it was. I knew that I couldn't do what other people did. Stupid workarounds for me I can't hang clothes up. I just can't. The idea of taking clothes and hanging them on a hanger and putting them in the closet, I tried that for 25 years. All I ended up with was piles on my chair in my room. And so I finally figured out that if I took out the bar in my closet and I put bins in my closet, and I just threw t-shirts in one bin and I put a label on it that said t-shirts, another one that said, sweatpants, another one that said jeans, all of a sudden my clothes got put away. And I have no cabinets in my kitchen, no open upper cabinets. I took everything off and I put upper shelves instead, because cabinets are where things go to disappear and never come back out. Anything in a drawer or behind a door gets hidden. If I can't see it, it doesn't exist. And I think because I've always been so quirky and had different ways of seeing things, it has enabled me to to realize that I'm not going to look like other people no matter what I do. So I'm going to stop trying, you know.
Yeah. You know, a lot of a surprising number of writer moms on the show have given some of these like home ec advice pieces, like the one that you
Right.
just did, and it's
Yeah.
amazing. Like the baskets in the closet, I'm gonna try that because the idea
Yeah.
of hanging things up, I do the same thing.
Right.
Um, I think it was, um, oh gosh, Liz Lenz maybe who has a sock basket and she doesn't match socks or roll them up. She just puts all the socks and they
Yeah.
pulls them out and they don't have to match or whatever.
No, I mean, we did
Um,
that. We did that for all my kids. My kids all have bins in their closet because I'm not hanging up their clothes either. I mean, I'm not. And at one point, we had all the kids. We've tried 100 different things. At one point, we had all the kids' clothes in bins next to the washer and dryer, and the kids would go down and we had shelves with their names on them. It's somewhat organized, but that way they couldn't keep them in their room, and they couldn't have them on the floor of their room. They couldn't have messy rooms, and their clothes were kept downstairs. You took them out of the washer and you put boys' shirts in one and girls' shirts in another and girls' pants in another. And they were all right there next to the washing machines. They were clean. And the kids came down every night, got their clothes for the next day, and put their dirty clothes into the hamper. And there were no clothes in their room. And their closets were empty. So when in their closets, they could keep all their books and all their toys and all the stuff they needed to hide in their room. It was fantastic. And just because other people figured out how to use hangers doesn't mean I'm ever going to figure it out. I mean, there are certain things I just don't want to spend my time doing.
I love that. I love that. I think I'm trying to remember again which I think it was Kristen Bear who said that she got all of her kids blue clothes. Like they were all just blue.
That's a
So
great
that
idea.
it doesn't, you can't see stains. They,
Right. I
you know,
mean, I have a lot of envy for people like Einstein who just wore the same thing every day, all day long. And I mean, I would if I had any choice. I remember in high school, a girl came up to me, and I was an odd duck in high school. And a girl came up and she said, we really like you and we want you to be part of our group. And I've really tried hard to get them to accept you, but you wear the same pair of jeans every day and they won't let me be friends with you if you wear the same pair of jeans every day. I was like, oh, people notice? She's like, yeah, they notice. It's like, I had no idea anybody ever looked at anything I wore. She's like, they do. She's like, can you just start? Do you have other clothes? I'm like, yeah, I just don't know how to hang them up or put them away, so I don't get them find them. And she's like, well, if you just start wearing other clothes, then you can be part of the. And I was like, whatever. And I think I did. I don't think I wanted to be part of their group as much as it opened my eyes to the way that other people see me and that there are other people paying it, because I've always felt invisible and that nobody cared what I wore. And I did start wearing better clothes and everything else. So your life doesn't have to look like anybody else's, but if you want friends, you kind of have to know what people are going to think is creepy and what people are going to think is, off kilter. And, so I do try to do the bare minimum to fit into basic society.
I think that's a valid goal. Yeah. I
Exactly.
know. I have like one outfit I wear. Well, in pandemic times too, it's
Yeah.
like the Target Prairie dress is
Right.
perfectly
Yeah.
acceptable and the,
Right.
sweatpants you wear every day to Zoom meetings.
Right. Well, that's what said. If Target really wants a great outfit to sell instead of the Prairie dress, they should sell a Zoom outfit where you have a fancy thing on top and sweatpants on the bottom with big pockets. And, you can wear it all day long. And that way, if you're walking by a Zoom meeting, you can just drop in and then go back to what you were doing.
Oh yeah.
Stain proof, wine proof, coffee proof, you know.
Yep.
And
Yeah, I
then,
always have to be careful when I stand up in a Zoom meeting because
oh,
not
yeah.
only do I wear sweatpants, but I haven't worn a bra in a year. So like I stand up, I'm like, well, better sort of
Yeah.
cover
Well, that's
myself.
what I was putting in my, I wrote about on Facebook right before this, is that I had to go get makeup for this because I haven't worn makeup in a year. So I had to send away for makeup. And I started Googling how to do makeup. And I was like, well, I don't have any followers because these makeup people have 8 million followers. What
I
are we
know.
talking about here? That's viral. And they're using words that I don't understand. And they're using things like contour and glitter and this and that. And you get the perfect cat eye. I'm like, I have no idea what's going on here. And I really screwed it up the first couple of times I put it on because I went and sent away for new makeup that I didn't know how to use. It's all a new world now,
No, I think you look great. And yeah, no, I'm with you. I had a photo shoot last week and it was literally the first time that I'd had my makeup done. Like even for my
Yeah.
wedding, I did my own make and she brought this like this rolling like cabinet out and
Yep.
I sat there and she did all this stuff and I was like, wow, this is good. And then she gave me a set of brushes, like the brushes that she did.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, I'm never gonna use I'm
Exactly.
never gonna do that again. But it did inspire me to get new lipstick. So I
Yeah.
wore
I mean, it
lipstick
was kind of
for you today.
fun. It was fun to try it today. It was good to have new makeup, and now I can, do it without looking ridiculous. But boy, the first couple times, I mean, I was even like, I'll try the false eyelashes too, and I put on like half of it. Was like, no, no, there are things I'm never going to do again. I'm never going to wear high heels. I'm never again going to wear pantyhose or high heels. I'm never going to do false eyelashes, and I'm okay with that. I can live with that as my legacy. You
Yeah.
know.
Yeah, I think you're onto something there.
Yeah.
And as Robin Jorgensen said here, patent that Zoom outfit idea ASAP. Yes, I will buy it.
Yeah, there
I
you
will
go.
be your first.
That's what Target should be doing. This is their audience, people who need
Totally.
something that won't you can't spill your wine on.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a whole other conversation, I
Yeah,
think,
no
is
kidding.
the
Yeah,
wine in a
pandemic
pandemic.
season. Yeah, no kidding. And I mean, and then I'm joking, but one of the things I said a couple months ago was, we're all going through really hard times, and it's tough right now. And if you need to drink, drink. If you need to, hang out with people and go see people, and that's the only thing that's going to keep your sanity, do it safely. And if the only thing, if you've been sober for 3 years, don't drink. Do what you need to do to keep you sane and happy, and don't give in to whatever the society pressures are right now, because this is a rough time for everybody. This is
Absolutely.
hard.
Yeah, and I'll remind people too that a lot of again, writer moms who have been on the show, we talk about trying to balance writing and motherhood and all of these things. And a few of the women have really helpfully reminded me and listeners, if you're not writing right now too, that's
Yeah.
okay, right?
Well, oh yeah, I thought I was going to edit this whole thing, and I thought I was going to write. I have another book in me somewhere about parenting and farm life, and the things I write about on Facebook, and cooking, and gluten-free cooking, and raising children, and discovering two half brothers, and there's a lot that I'd like to
Yeah.
write about. I didn't get anything done this year. I mean, I did, but it was gardening like a crazy person, to dig holes. So I felt like I was, going outside, and I painted my bedroom, and I knocked down walls, and I'm remodeling the basement, and I put in hardwood stairs. I'm not a carpenter. I don't know anything about putting in hardwood stairs, but it was something that I could engage my brain in, where I could learn a whole new skill and learn how to use the saw and learn how to use everything, because it kept my mind from the fact that we're, in a horrific situation,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah, and with writing too, until you have that book or even printed
Yeah.
out pages of your manuscript, it is just sort of like it's this amorphous thing, right? Either in
Right.
your brain or on the computer, and it feels really good right now during this pandemic to do something you can see,
Yes.
like plant a seed and watch
Yes.
something come up.
Something tangible, something you have your hands on. And for me, especially, since I'm editing, the memoir, and that's my current project. I'm revising it, trying to get it done. I don't have an agent right now, and that's my next goal, is to find an agent that does memoir and that wants it. And memoirs are hard to sell. There's a lot of genres out there that are easy. If I were writing something that was, teen literature right now, everybody wants that, but memoirs are hard. And so I'm working on this memoir, and a lot of it is not fun stuff to write about. Writing about, being on the run, or all the things that were bad with my mom. Who wants to dredge that up in the middle of this whole pandemic thing? It's like, no, I'm going to go write fancy Facebook posts about fun things, about gardening, and about flowers, and about my son and his weird hobbies. And I'm not going to write about, bad things right now. And I think that's okay. I think it's okay to indulge whatever you need to do to keep your brain happy right now.
Yeah, and you've obviously been connecting with so many people through those posts because they provide a sense of joy and levity
Right.
and a peek into your world, which you've described as quirky, but is also just like amazing with farm animals and fields and
Well,
flowers
yeah,
and
well, that goes
yeah,
back to the whole, your life doesn't have to look like somebody else's. I mean, nobody wants a 50s farmhouse that's falling down in the middle of nowhere with goats. This is not something that a lot of people want. They might, like the idea of it, but the first time they step in the mud and the goats and everything else, it's a lot. And it's a lot of work, and it's not for everybody. But yeah, I mean, it's fun to write about. I mean, there are so many good things. I mean, just collecting your own eggs every day, and baking bread with your own eggs and things like that is a lot of fun. There's a lot of upsides to this. And so, yeah, I'd much rather write about, what the goats are doing today than something bad.
yeah. Oh, I have so many more questions. I know we're on an hour here, but I want to ask you just quickly too about the farm, and you mentioned you got the farm for your son.
Yeah.
Um, tell us just about how that came about. Like,
We were in Texas, and my husband's from Houston, and he's lived in Texas his entire life. And he is um, my husband is pretty much the all-American man. He is a fantastic human being, and he's 6 foot tall, and he's an engineer, and he's good looking, and he was a Boy Scout, and his parents had been married his entire life, and they got married at 21 and 22, and had him at 24, and he had been to one school K through 12 all the way through, and lived in one house the whole time. And for me, it was like marrying into Leave It to Beaver, and it was this whole different family. And so he's from Texas, and we had always lived there, but I didn't always live there. I knew there were other places I wanted to live. I knew there were other worlds out there. And I kept kind of nudging him, saying, we don't need to live in Texas. But the last summer we were in Austin, and I liked Austin, but the last summer we were there had 100 days over 100 degrees. And it had 30 days over 110 degrees.
hmm,
And I had a newborn, and I was like, I'm not doing this. I can't take her out of the house until 9 o'clock at night when it's under 90 degrees. There's no way I can live like this anymore. And at one point on my mother's random trips around the United States, we lived in Oregon for a while, and Oregon was gorgeous. And so I knew we liked it up this place in this area. And so when my husband was offered a job, he started looking for jobs somewhere cooler. We looked up here, and my son needed wide open spaces. He was 9 when we moved here, and he was a climber. And we would go to a park, and he would run to the top, but first tree he would see, and he would climb it, and then he would look for the tallest tree, and he would climb it. And he was the one that when you go to the park and the mothers are going, oh my God, is that kid? Where is his mother? And it would always be me. That they would always be looking for me, because he was the one at the top of the tallest tree ready to climb out. And the other kids would be following him, and the other mothers would be, you can't follow him. He's the one you can't follow. I mean, at 4, he was climbing light poles with his bare feet. He would take off his shoes, and barefoot, he would climb to the top of the light pole and use his toes in his hands, and he'd get to the top. But if he had touched a wasp or anything on the pole, he would have been falling. I mean, 40 feet sometimes. He was incredible with the kind of input that he needed in order to stay sane, and for us to stay sane. And we did a lot of going to parks, and we did a lot of going out, but at some point you need more. And I said he was obsessed, not obsessed, interested in his special interest was animals, and he always wanted a goat. And so he said the only thing he wanted in life was a goat. And so we moved to a farm, and it's a very small farm. By farm standards, it's 10 acres, which is huge by, suburban standards, but it has an enormous barn that was built in the 1920s, and has a silo that I don't even know what a silo is for, and we don't use it. And it has work buildings and outbuildings and a chicken coop from 1920. And when we moved here, the lady next door, who was 83, was born in this house. And she had been raised here, and her father built the house and built the farm. And so she was able to show us where the outhouse was, and that the outhouse had been built in the 1930s by Roosevelt's for the farm workers, so that they would stop pooping in the fields. And the Roosevelt built all the outhouses. And she showed us what the barn was originally used for, and that she and her brothers would collect eggs every day from the chicken coop, and they had 2,000 chickens, and they would have to collect eggs before they went to school every morning.
oh my God.
It was originally a 40-acre farm, and the rest had been sold off. But and they had 40 dairy cows, and they used to milk, and so some of the equipment was still here for milking. And so we started off slow with a couple of goats, and my son was in love with his goat. The first we got was named Zenora, and Zenora was his pride and joy, and he adored her. You've never seen a boy love a goat this much. And it was the right thing to do. He was out in the field every day with Zenora, and hugging her and walking around with her and training her. And I don't know anything about 4-H. I'd never been to a 4-H meeting, and I started a 4-H club for homeschoolers that showed goats at the county fair. And we went to the county fair, and we showed Zenora, and he won a prize for goat showing. And there was a costume contest where you got to dress up your goats. And we did all of it, and it was good. It was really good for us. And as he's gotten older, the animals are not as important. Although he and his dog are just as close. We got a puppy 6 months ago, and Rosie and Sandra just are inseparable. Um, and the farm has. My husband has actually enjoyed it. He raises a couple of cows. He's got 2 cows, and they're not a lot of work. He goes to a brewery in town and gets barley for them 3 days a week from the brewery. Uses all of their barley for beer, and the spent barley after they boiled it, he comes back and he takes it to the cows, and that's his thing that he does. Is he takes the cows barley, and we have fresh beef for days. We just butchered 2 cows a couple weeks ago, and I think we got 2,800 pounds of meat, something like that, and sold it. And I mean, there's work, but it's not a working farm where that's all of our income. So it's not as hard as it was. We have the goats because they keep the blackberries down, because Sandra likes the goats. And we have chickens because they lay eggs, and because chickens are fun. And when Sandra goes to college in a couple of years, he's 16. He's going to be in 11th grade, so he's got 2 or 3 years till he goes. Do Mark and I want to raise goats and cows by ourselves? I'm not a big cow person. I'm not here for the goats, but we'll see what happens.
On that note,
Yeah.
that's amazing. Thank you so much,
You're
Megan, for
welcome.
joining us. This has been really fun.
Good.
Stick around for a second when we wrap up, but yeah, thank you. And you'll see a lot of nice comments in the chat here too. A lot of people saying that you're uplifting and providing you some much needed humor and vicarious living through you.
Good. I'll
So
have to go
thank
back
you.
and look at all the comments. So, all right. Thank you for everything.
Yeah, definitely. And thank you all for joining us. As you know, you can listen to the episode again as a podcast. You can watch it. You can read a transcript on writermothermonster.com. And we will be back next week. Please join us. And if you're so inclined, become a patron or patroness on Patreon to help me keep this going. So thank you all and have a great night.
Bye.